welcome back to my channel, Everlynn's Books and Tea. Thank you so much for joining me for this video, and this is my favorite video to record, and that is our TBR game for the month of May. It's time to choose our May TBR. That being said, my April TBR did not go so well. I don't know what happened, but I've only read 2 out of the 7 books so far, and we're almost to the end of May. I did read 2 additional books for my monthly challenge, but that still only leaves me at 4 books for the entire month. There are 2 more days left in this month, so I'm hoping to read at least 1 more. We'll see, and bring my total to a grand total of 5, but we'll see how that goes. So while I didn't do as much reading this month, what I did do is spend my time creating TBR cards for this game. So for those who have watched the previous videos, you know my prompts have been on these little scraps of paper. The paper is just getting hard to fold back up, and I just didn't like the way it was looking. So I decided to go ahead and create these cards that we'll be playing with from now on. We'll still be using the same bags where the cards will be in, but instead of the little scraps of paper for each prompt, we're going to be using TBR cards. So each card looks like this on the front. I decided to call this game Book Harvest because it's a seasonal game and it just sounded like a good name for me. And then on the back of each card there will be a prompt. This is a spring prompt. It's one of our seasonal prompts, and the prompt will be there at the bottom. So I have prompts for all, or I have cards for all the prompts that we have. So I'm excited to use these in this video and see how it goes. So that's all I got for updates. So let's go ahead and start playing the game and choose our first prompt. So let's bring up the board and roll the dice. Alright, so we rolled a 2 for our first roll of the game, and we landed on a blue flower. So that will correspond to our bag that is blue here. So let's grab the cards from this bag and we'll choose the first prompt of the game. Alright, so here are our cards. I'm going to mix them up real quick, and then we'll split the deck and choose our first prompt for May. Alright, so let's split it here. And then our first prompt is a cover prompt, which is a cover with a person on it. So that's a pretty good prompt. It's going to leave me with a lot of choices, which I like. So we'll first choose our physical book for that prompt, then we'll go ahead and choose our electronic book for that prompt. I have all my electronic lists over here. And let's see what our first 2 books on our May TBR are. What I'm going to do is see if there are any people on the series I'm already in the middle of, because I really want to get through some of those series. So let's take a look at those books first. 2 of them are up here. We have A Heart So Fierce and Broken and All In, neither of which have people on the cover. The other series I'm in the middle of is the Mortal Instrument series. That is one of the books I got to in April. So I am on the second book, and guess what? That book has a person on it. So this book is City of Ashes by Cassandra Clare. It's the second book in her Mortal Instrument series. It's kind of like a urban fantasy series. It's set in New York City and revolves around shadow hunters, werewolves, vampires, demons, etc. So this series follows Clary, who in the first book starts realizing that she can see things that others don't, and she then kind of finds out why and kind of starts a new life after that. I don't want to say too much more because it'll probably ruin the first book. I did enjoy the first book. It was a little bit slower in parts. It's definitely not one of my favorite fantasy books that I read, but I'm excited to get to the second book and kind of see what happens. Part of the reason that the first book might have seemed a little slow to me is that I did watch the TV series before reading these books, which I usually don't, and therefore I kind of know a lot of what's going to happen, which probably is affecting my impression on these books now that I'm reading the books through. But I'm excited to read the second book in the series and see how that goes. So this will be our first physical book that we're adding to our May TBR. Now let me look over here at our electronic books and see what books we have to choose from there. So there are a lot of book covers that have people on them for the electronic TBR. We have historical fantasy books like The Shadowy Horses by Susanna Kersley. We have historical fiction books like My Dear Hamilton. But the book that we are going to go with is a middle grade book, and that is because after kind of having a slump in April, I want to have some books that are easier and quicker to read to get through my TBR in case I get stuck in the middle of May. So the book that we are going to go with is The Sword of Summer, which is the first book in the Magnus Chase and the Gods of Asgard series, which is by Rick Riordan, who is the author of the Percy Jackson series. So his series are middle grade series based on mythology. So this book follows Magnus Chase, who's been living on the streets for the past couple of years after his mom just told him to run. He has realized that someone is trying to track him down, and he comes to find out that is his uncle. His uncle is the one man that his mom warned him about, saying, I guess, that, you shouldn't have anything to do with him. But unfortunately, Magnus falls into his clutches, and when he does, his uncle just starts rambling about Norse mythology and the weapon that he's supposed to inherit. And then some monster falls onto the city, and now Magnus is stuck with this choice of saving himself or risking his life to save the hundreds of innocent lives living in the city. So this is the book I'm going to go with, just in case, like I said, I need a quick read. And this will be our first electronic book on our TBR. And you can see that there's a person on the cover right up there. All right, so let's do our second roll of the game and see what we land on. So for our second roll, we rolled an 8, and this time we landed on pink. So let me take out the pink cards. I just realized I forgot to tell you what was on the cards for the first roll, but if we land on blue again, I will let you know. So for the pink bag, we have prompts that have to do with the title of the stories. We have some miscellaneous prompts, and then some prompts that have to do with series that I'm in the middle of reading of. Yes. So let me mix up these cards and see what we get for our second prompt. All right, so let's split the deck. This is our second prompt of the game. It's a series prompt, and the series is the Artemis Fowl series. I did say I wanted some more middle grade books on this TBR, so I guess the game is listening to me. So let me grab that. That's actually an electronic book that I have. So here's the book that we'll be reading, potentially. It's the Arctic Incidents, and it's the second book in the Artemis Fowl series, which is a middle grade fantasy series that follows Artemis Fowl, who is a child of wealthy parents, basically, and gets himself involved in the fairy goblin world. There's not too much else to say without ruining the series, but they are quick reads, and this will be our second book on our May TBR. Now, that being said, obviously, we can't choose that for the physical book, so we are going to choose a second prompt for the physical book. All right, so again, we will split the deck. And this time, our prompt is a title prompt, and it is a book with a food in the title. So there are two books that we can choose from. The first is The Candy House by Jennifer Egan. This book is kind of a science fiction-y book that challenges the thought of what would happen if people could download their memories, their thoughts, and other people could see them. So that's our first option. Then the second option doesn't exactly have food in the title. It has a drink, but I feel like food and drink are very similar, so I'm going to say this fits the prompt. Plus, I don't have a prompt that says must have a drink in the title, so we are going to go with this one, and it is A Tempest of Tea by Hafsa Faizal. And tea is in the title, and that's a drink, which is close enough to food for me. So this is a fantasy book that follows Arthi, who is the owner of this prestigious tea room that at night turns over to cater to the vampires. One day this establishment is threatened, and she ends up making this deal that involves a job that she has to do, and the job is to break into a sinister vampire society. So she gathers this crew to do this, but then one of the crew ends up not being on her side, and she ends up in the middle of this conspiracy that threatens her city and the world, I guess, as she knows it. So this is the physical book that we'll choose for our second book. It'll be A Tempest of Tea. So we'll put this book onto our TBR list for the month of May. All right, so let's do our third roll for the game. All right, so for our third roll, we rolled a 6 and we landed on yellow. So let's grab our yellow bag. So for those who watched my April TBR, you know that we landed on the yellow flower for pretty much the whole game. We'll see if that streak continues in this game. But The yellow bag has kind of all the prompts that change every month. So for this month, it's going to have prompts that have to do with spring, prompts that have to do with May, prompts that have to do with the 2 astrological signs in May, which are Gemini and Taurus. So let me mix up these cards, and then we will choose our third prompt for May. All right, split the deck. All right, so our third prompt for May is a prompt that has to do with May, and it is a dark green cover. So I know what book I'm going to choose for that, and it's this one right here. So like I said before, I'm really trying to get the next books in series that I'm already in the middle of so I can kind of check them off my list. And this is the second book in Brigid Kemmerer series that starts off with A Curse So Dark and Lonely. This is A Heart So Fierce and Broken. The series is kind of based off of the Beauty and the Beast fairy tale. It follows the 2 main characters, which are Prince Wren of Emberfall, and then Harper, who is a person that lives on Earth, and then in the first book finds herself in this fantasy world of Emberfall. So this is just going to kind of continue along on their journey in this world of Emberfall. And I really love the first book in the series, and I'm very excited to read the second book. It's been, I think, a couple of months since I read that first book. I think it was back in December, actually. So I really want to get to the second book before I forget too much of what I read in the first. So we'll add A Heart So Fierce and Broken to our physical TBR. This nice and dark green cover. All right, let me see if I have any dark green covers on our electronic TBR list. So most of the covers on my electronic TBR list are light green. Well, I wouldn't say most. I would say the ones that are green, most of them are light green. But I did find one that had dark green on the cover, or as dark as it gets on that list. And that is Garden of Lies. No, Lies. Garden of Lies, which is by Eileen Gouge. This is book 1 in her Garden of Lies series. It follows Rachel and Rose, who grew up kind of worlds apart. Rachel is growing up in the Manhattan luxury world, while Rose is growing up kind of in the New York low-income area. They end up both falling in love with the same man, and they end up being brought face to face with the truth about each other and themselves, is really the only description I have. So we'll add this to our TBR list, and that again is Gardens of Lies by Eileen Gouge. On to the 4th roll. So for the 4th roll of the game, we rolled a 7, and of course we ended up on another yellow flower. So let's grab those cards and see what we get for our 4th prompt of the game. All right, let's split the deck. All right, here's our 4th prompt. It is a spring prompt, and it says book with pastel colors on the cover. All right, so we went from dark green to pastel colors. So let's see what we can find that has pastel colors on the cover. So there weren't many books that really had pastel colors on them. The closest I could find is called Otherworldly by F.T. Lukens. You can kind of see his shirt is kind of like a pastel orange. At least that's what we're going to say. So this is a young adult fantasy novel. It follows Ellery, who lives in a region where everyone believes in the supernatural, the paranormal, but she believes that there's a scientific explanation behind everything. Even the fact that the world that she's living in has been in a 5-year winter season. One day she ends up running into Knox, who happens to be a familiar from the other world, and his job is to help humans who have made crossroad bargains. But he hasn't heard from his queen for a long time, and the day that Ellery runs into him, demons are trying to chase him down. Ellery ends up fighting these demons, and when she actually meets and talks to Knox, she can't believe anything that he's saying. Like he's telling her that he's paranormal, that he's from this other world, and she just does not believe him. But she ends up striking a deal with him because he needs her to tether him to this world. And after that, they are now connected, and the growing connection between the two may end up just changing everything. So this will be our first option. Otherworldly by F.T. Lukens. So now I gotta choose my electronic book. So for my electronic book, I am going with The Secret Book of Flora Lee. The sunset is in pastel colors, so I feel like it fits the prompt. This is a book I've had on my TBR a couple of times. I haven't gotten to it. It is one of the 24 books I want to read in 24, so I really do need to get around to reading it. And it does sound like an interesting story. It takes place in historical England around the time of World War II, and two sisters, Hazel and Flora, are sent to a rural village to escape the bombings of London, basically. There, 14-year-old Hazel entertains her younger sister, Flora, who's 5 years old, with stories that she makes up, and she ends up making this whole world that she creates for her sister alone, which is a fairy tale about magical land, and it's kind of a place that they escape to together. One day, her younger sister ends up going missing and never is found, and Hazel just ends up feeling super guilty about that. The book then, I guess, goes 20 years into the future, and Hazel has a successful career at a rare bookstore, but she's about to make the transition to Sotheby's when a package ends up upturning her entire life, because inside is a illustrated book called Whisperwood and the River of Stars, which is based on the fairy tales that she told her sister and only her sister. So now she doesn't know if this means that her sister is alive or what is going on. And that is a mystery that needs to be solved. So it sounds really intriguing, and I'm really excited to read that. And hopefully I'll get to it this month in May, but only time will tell. We will see. So this will be our third electronic book, The Secret Book of Flora Lee, which is by Patty Callahan Henry. All right, we are over halfway done. So let's go ahead and roll the dice for our fifth roll. So look at that. We rolled a 5, and once again, we landed on yellow. This game really likes to land on the yellow flowers, but I'm not complaining because, like I said, these are my favorite prompts in the game. So let's see what we get for our fifth prompt of the game. All right, let's split the deck. All right, this will be our fifth prompt. It is a astrological sign prompt with Taurus, and it is a book with food on the cover. So we've already kind of done this prompt, so we're going to put it back and choose the next prompt just because we've already done it. So let's see what our fifth prompt for the month of May is. I split the deck. Oops, there we go. And this is our fifth prompt. It's an astrological sign prompt for Gemini, and it is read a book chosen at random. All right, so this is how this is going to work. We're going to count up all our books on here, up here, and then choose a random number. So let me get to it, and let me count how many books are on this TBR cart, and then we will go ahead and choose a random number. So we're going to start here, finish on the last shelf of the back of the cart. So let me get to counting, and I'll be right back. So there are 81 books on my TBR cart, plus these books, plus those two books back there. So let me pull up a random number generator. So we're going to put in 1 to 81. And we are going to hit generate. And we got the number 24. So let's count the books and see which book is number 24. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. You are not going to believe which book is number 24. It is probably the book that I am least likely to choose for myself to read this month, and it is The Birth of Britain, A History of the English-Speaking Peoples, Volume 1 by Winston S. Churchill. So this is a nonfiction history book that this book I think covers, I don't even know. This book covers from the beginning of Britannia all the way through Richard III. So I do love British history, I will say that, but these types of books I usually don't read like in a month. I usually read them slowly throughout several months. But, you know, the game is telling me I need to get this on my TBR, so I guess we will throw this book on my TBR and maybe we'll be learning some British history this month. We shall see. It is supposed to be one of the better history books for Britain by Winston Churchill, and it is the Barnes and Noble's Library of Essential Reading, so it is important to read. So we'll add this book as our 5th physical book on our TBR. All right, I'm a little nervous, but we are going to see what we come up with on our electronic TBR. Here we go. All right, so there are 99 books on my electronic TBR list, so let's again choose a random number and we'll see what we get. All right, 1 through 99. Let's hit generate. We got 90. That's actually good because more of the books that I want to read are at the bottom of this TBR list. So let me count through 90 books. I guess I can go backwards from 99 to 90. And let's see what book we have. So we ended up getting The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo by Stieg Larsson. This is book 1 in the Millennium Trilogy. The first 3 books in this trilogy I think are supposed to be really good, and then I think it kind of peters off after the first 3. So this is a series that follows, I believe it's Lisbeth Salander is going to be the main character in the story. In the first book, Harriet Vanguard, who is part of one of Sweden's wealthiest families, ended up disappearing 40 years ago, and her uncle wants to find the truth of what happened. So he ends up hiring a journalist, and that journalist is going to be aided by this tattooed prodigy, Lisbeth Salander. So this is kind of a book that combines murder with mystery, some family saga, maybe a love story in there as well. So I've heard good things about the first book. I think it's been made into a movie as well, which I haven't watched. I don't really know much else about the plot than what I just read. So I'm excited if I end up reading this one to kind of see how I feel about the books. But this will be our 5th book on our electronic TBR. It'll be The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. So that was a interesting pairing of books. All right, we have 2 more prompts to go. Let's see what we get. So for our 6th roll of the game, we rolled a 3. What do we land on? Yellow. All right. So let's cut the deck and see what we get for our 6th and second to last prompt of May. Oops, there we go. And it is a Taurus prompt, and it is set in the country or a remote area. So that sounds like a fun prompt. Let's see what we can find on our physical TBR. Okay, so I found a book that we're going to go with. It was actually on my April TBR and I never got around to reading it, and that is Breaking All the Rules by Amy Andrews. This is a kind of like a comedy romance book. It's set in Colorado, and on the cover, while the town itself is probably not called this, it does say that Beatrice, which is the main character, is moving to nowhere, Colorado. So that makes it sound remote, so I feel like this fits the prompt. So Beatrice has come to the realization that she is tired of how she's living, what's going on, and she wants to kind of take her life back and live it on her own terms. So she ends up moving to Colorado. There, she's kind of doing things the way that she wants and not really caring what anyone else thinks. So one day she goes out to eat, I think in her pajamas, and a cop who happens to be attractive is called to talk to her and discuss the inappropriate clothing that she is wearing. She ends up realizing that he may be what's missing in her life, and Officer Austin, which is his name, is eager to kind of assist her in breaking the rules, as long as they're not in a law-breaking way. But she soon realizes that breaking the rules has consequences and that not everyone may be able to save her. So this will be the book that we will put on for this prompt. It will be our 6th physical TBR book of the game. Breaking All the Rules by Amy Andrews. Just seems like a fun romance read. All right, let me take a look at our electronic TBR and see what we have over there. So for our electronic TBR list, I'm actually going with a nonfiction memoir for this. It's called Remote, A Story of St. Helena. This is a book that is written by an author who decided to buy a house on St. Helena Island, which is one of the most remote islands in the world. And it kind of chronicles her journey living there, the uniqueness about living on an island that's so remote, and just kind of the trials and tribulations that come from living on that island. So we'll add this as our 6th TBR book. Again, it's called Remote, A Story of St. Helena. And it's, like I said, a memoir of the author's time there. I think the author's name is Lindsay Grattan Cooper. All right, so we have 6 books down. That means we only have 1 roll to go and 1 prompt left to choose. So let's do our 7th and final roll for the month of May. So for our 7th and final roll of the game, we rolled a 1, and this time we didn't end up on yellow. We ended up on blue. So let's grab our prompts from our blue bag. And these prompts have to do with the cover of the book, and then we have some miscellaneous and some series prompts as well. So let's bring up the cards, let's split the deck, and let's see what our 7th and final prompt for May is. And it is a miscellaneous prompt, and it is a author I've never read. All right, so that's easy enough. There are plenty of authors on here that I have not read, so let me see which book we're going to choose. All right, so I found the book that I'm going to choose. And this book has been on my TBR, I think, a couple of times, but I haven't gotten to it yet. It's called The Glass Woman by Caroline Leah. It's a historical fiction book set in 17th century Iceland, and it follows Rosa, who ends up being betrothed to John Erickson, and they go to live in the remote village that he is from. And there she finds that her husband is very quiet, and all the villagers kind of view her arrival with suspicion. But then strange things start to happen. There's strange sounds coming from the attic. She's given this mysterious glass figure that she doesn't know what it represents. And the villagers talk of the coming winter darkness in hushed tones. So she doesn't really know what's going on. So there's this big mystery that is occurring. So it sounds like an interesting storyline again, and kind of excited to see what is going on. It's known as the Icelandic Jane Eyre. So this will be our 7th and final physical book, and it is The Glass Woman by Laura Purcell, or not by Laura Purcell, by Caroline Leah. I was reading the comments up here. For electronic book, we are going to go with a science fiction book, and that is Across a Billion Years by Robert Silverberg. Again, this is an author I have not read before. This book follows a graduate student, Tom Rice, who is embarking on his first deep space archaeological expedition. And the goal of this expedition is to search for artifacts from a civilization known as the High Ones that kind of ruled the universe for many millennia. One clue that this civilization left is known as the Message Cube, and through this cube they've come to realize that maybe this civilization is not extinct as they thought it was. So this whole mission ends up turning from an archaeological mission to a manhunt for the people of this advanced civilization. So that is kind of the premise of the book, and this will be the 7th and final electronic TBR book on our TBR. Again, it is Across a Billion Years by Robert Silverberg. So that concludes our TBR game. We definitely got quite a eclectic mix of books on this TBR. Some of them I'm really excited to read. Some of them I am not so excited about, but I own them and I want to get through them. So we'll see how the month of May goes. All right, so before we end this video, let's do a quick recap of the books that are on the May TBR for me. So for the prompt of an author I've never read before, we have The Glass Woman by Caroline Leah, and we have Across a Billion Years by Robert Silverberg. For the prompt that the book is set in a remote or country location, we have Breaking All the Rules by Amy Andrews, and we have Remote, A Story of St. Helena by Lindsay Grattan Cooper. And then for a book that is chosen at random, we have The Birth of Britain, A History of the English-Speaking People, Volume 1 by Winston Churchill, and I only own Volume 1. And we have The Girl with a Dragon Tattoo by Stieg Larsson. For a book that has pastel colors on the cover, we have Otherworldly by F.T. Lukens and The Secret Book of Flora Leah by Patty Callahan Henry. For a book with a dark green cover, we have A Heart So Fierce and Broken by Birgit Kemmerer, and we have Garden of Lies by Eileen Gouge. For a book with a cover that has a person on it, we have City of Ashes, Book 2 in the Mortal Instrument series by Cassandra Clare, And we have The Sword of Summer, Book 1 in the Magnus Chase in the Gods of Asgard series by Rick Riordan. Last but not least, we have the series prompt, Artemis Fowl series. We're reading The Arctic Incidents by... Oops, that's upside down. We're reading The Arctic Incidents by Ian Colfer, which is book 2 in the Artemis Fowl series. And then for the physical book, we had a book that had food or title in the cover. And we are going with A Tempest of Tea by Hafsa Fazal. So those are our books for the month of May. We got a lot of fantasy on here. We got some nonfiction history books on here. So we, like I said, we have a nice wide range of books. So I'm excited. This should be a good month of reading. Hopefully I'll get through more than just 2 books on this TBR list. I am excited that we have a couple of books that are second in their series. So I can kind of move along on those series and hopefully get to finishing them, because I don't even know how many series I'm in the middle of. But it always makes me feel good when I can check one off the list. So I hope you've enjoyed this video as much as I enjoy making it. I hope your May TBRs go well and that you get through the books that you want to get through in the month of May. The weather's turning warmer, so I'm excited to hopefully sit outside and read some versus, you know, having to sit inside in the cold Northeast winter. I have one other video that I'm almost completely done with, and that is my April challenge video. My April challenge was to have ChatGPT choose a theme and then to read books from that theme. I ended up reading 2 books from that theme, both of which I really enjoyed, and I'm excited to share that with you. So hopefully that video will come out about a week or so after this one, and then I am planning on posting my monthly challenges the month after they're done instead of the same month, because that gives me a little extra time. So the May challenge video should come out in June. So thanks again for joining me for this video. I'll see you guys in my next video. Take care and have a good reading month in May. Bye!